Hello again, watch friends. Welcome back. I'd like to share with you my Seiko SARG011 watch. I've had it for quite a while and finally decided to do a review. This watch is not a safe queen by any means, so there may be a few dings or even scuffs on the case. I strongly believe that watches, at least my watches, are meant to be worn, and that's just what I do. I don't abuse my watches, even the inexpensive ones, but signs of wear are part of the watch's history. I'd like to focus on two ideas as they pertain to this watch, and Seiko in general. They are product strategy and subtlety. I think framing this review with these two concepts in mind, at least initially, may give some perspective to the watch, or at the very least, why it appeals to me. Product strategy. Every company has a product strategy regardless of what they're selling. And there are two basic aspects to that: how to position themselves in the market and what products to make. Seiko is unrivaled in its breadth and depth of its watches. As you know, it has mechanical watches selling from sub $100 to tens of thousands of dollars in its Grand Seiko and Creedor lines. In the sub $1,000 price category, there are a number of Seiko favorites, such as the SARBs, the cocktail time versions, and of course, many divers. The reason I mention product strategy is because Seiko has had a number of excellent watches that they have discontinued for conceivably unknown reasons. Take the SARB line. The SARG011 is probably the most popular mechanical watch Seiko makes, at least today. Seiko announced that it and its white dial sibling, the SARG035, as well as the 017 Alpinist, would be discontinued 2 years ago, but they still can be found. But there are other beautiful SARBs that were discontinued about 5 years ago. The salmon dial SARG037, the blue dial SARG009, and the fantastic red dial SARG011. These watches are so popular that they cannot be found anywhere, not even on used watch boards. That brings me to the SARG011 that I am reviewing here. This watch was also discontinued a few years ago. It has continued to be a very popular model and is difficult to find anywhere, new or used. I think it looks quite smart and would still be popular today if it was available. So why does Seiko do this? Discontinue seemingly very popular watch models? Of course, I have no idea, but I would assume that it's to make space for newer models in the portfolio. Can't always be selling the same old stuff, can we? Now, maybe the watches didn't sell originally and only found demand and popularity after they were gone. That's possible. But it seems a shame that these attractive models are no longer available, especially when there seems to be pent-up demand. Seiko has not been immune from issuing remakes and limited editions. Maybe Seiko should take another look at some of their discontinued models and think about making them available even for a limited amount of time. That's all part of product strategy. The second aspect I'd like to focus on with this watch is subtlety. There are quite a few subtle and maybe not so subtle aspects of the SARG that drew me to it. The first is maybe not so subtle, and that is the red-tipped seconds hand with loomed lollipop counterweight. The splash of red against the matte black dial really makes the gestalt of the watch come alive. And I'm a big fan of this approach. Wait, what? What is that? No, can't be. A Zen 556i? Off with you, Zen. This is a Seiko watch review. Now, that's better. At least another Seiko. The SNK 809. with, well, as I said, red-tipped seconds hand. Anyway, back to the SARG. The red-tipped seconds hand adds some class to this piece, I think. What say you? The second instance of subtlety really is subtle, and you must look closely to see it. Both the hour and minute sword hands are edged in chrome. This fine outline, if you will, elevates the hands from being just another set of all Lume hands. And in certain lighting, the hand edges look black or silver. A nice touch. Now, the hour markers, either Arabic numbers at even intervals or indices at odd intervals, are painted on with Seiko's Lume-Bright luminous material. They look almost three-dimensional because, well, they sort of are. But I want to call your attention to the applied Seiko marquee at 12 o'clock. Seiko could have cheaped out here and just painted Seiko and be done with it. But no, Seiko decided to add another touch of class by using an applied logo. One may argue that it's placed just a little too high. I would. But I like it nonetheless. Once again, you'll need either a good set of eyes or a jeweler's loupe to notice this subtle trait. The minute track, or seconds track as it were, runs around the perimeter of the dial. A numeric label at every 5 seconds helps identify the current minutes or seconds, although I think we're all smart enough to figure this out without the marking. Still, I like it. Now, look very closely between each of the seconds divisions. What do you see? 5 increment markings printed in gray between each one. That's pretty cool, and hardly noticeable when the watch is on the wrist. Finally, the last subtle characteristic of this particular SARG is the bevel in the case side. It's located on the lower third of the case side, and it's difficult to see if you're not looking for it. But it is there. Again, Seiko could have opted for a slab side case, like a lot of other watch models, but decided to add some interest, and to me anyway, a degree of pleasure. It makes looking at the case more exciting. All in all, someone at Seiko, or perhaps some group of people at Seiko, designers, product people, marketers, etc., were clearly paying attention when they created the SARG011. It shows in the simple quality of the watch and the subtle characteristics I mentioned. When viewed off the wrist, or perhaps in pictures, the SARG looks like a large watch, although the diameter is really 40.8 millimeters. It does appear larger because it's all dial, and it has a thin bezel. At 12.7 millimeters, it's not particularly thick, but not unexpected in this type of watch. Lug-to-lug distance is a relative short 47.1 millimeters. A sapphire crystal up top and a see-through sapphire crystal on the bottom complete the case, which offers a 100-meter water resistance. And while signed, the crown does not screw down, so be aware. There really isn't much to see of the movement. It's not finely worked, but it is utilitarian, and it's always nice to see the tiny machine beating away. I have to say, though, that when the SARG is on the wrist, at least my wrist, it looks just right. Not out of place or like some giant monstrosity that we're all too familiar with from certain unmentioned brands. The watch has a very nice wrist presence, and when I'm wearing it, I feel like not taking it off. The SARG uses Seiko's ubiquitous 6R15 automatic movement, which has hacking, where the second hand stops when you pull out the crown, so as to set the watch precisely to a time standard, and it also has hand wagging. The movement is an upscale version of the 7S and 4R calibers, and beats at 21,600 beats per hour. 50 hours of power are available on a full wind. The The 6R15 also uses a Sprawn 510 mainspring, which provides somewhat more anti-magnetic properties than one would expect at this price point. And this movement is more or less equivalent to the iconic Swiss 2824-2 that is seen on a plethora of Swiss brands, costing in the hundreds to the low thousands apiece. There are a few other notable or not so notable aspects of the SARG that should be mentioned. Firstly, the date window on the dial is rather small and framed by a black border. White numerals on a black background make it unobtrusive. But I know that dates on dials is sometimes controversial. If this were a dress watch, I can understand that, since the addition of a date can break up the otherwise harmonious symmetry of the dial. But here, I'm glad to have the date when I need it. And more often than not, it's ignored. The strap is a simple affair. It is somewhat thick, padded, and stamped Seiko calf, so I assume it's calfskin. The strap was supple right out of the box and is comfortable on the wrist. However, the watch comes with a 2-button deployant clasp that I like. Somewhat surprising on a watch at this price level. The deployant clasp minimizes wear and tear on the leather strap, since you won't be bending the strap as you fasten and unfasten the watch on your wrist. And fortunately, the clasp is not very thick, so it hugs the wrist and doesn't catch on anything. Then there's the mighty Lume. Seiko is well known for good quality and long-lasting lume, and the SARG is no exception. Seiko's Lumebrite is used on the hands, seconds counterweight, numerals, and indices. It glows brightly in the dark and lasts for several hours. The lume on this SARG is one of the reasons I bought the watch. So what kind of watch is this? Sport? Field? Pilot? I don't know. It's a little large for a traditional field watch, and at least compared to, say, the Hamilton Khaki Mechanical, the Marathon GP Mechanical, or even the Seiko SNK 809 or the Seiko SNZ G15, those watches exhibit the field watch raison d'être, which is easy to read dial, modest size, and good lume. So for the SARG, 2 out of 3, I guess, is good. Is it a pilot watch? Well, here, size is not an issue, but the varying sizes of numerals and indices don't seem to conform to what a traditional pilot watch looks like. A Zin 104, LACO Type B, or IWC Big Pilot are some best examples of that genre. I think the bottom line is that the SARG011 is whatever you want it to be. It clearly is sporty, fieldy, and probably a little pilot-y. Not a dress watch, but a sport field watch with perhaps pilot aspirations. There. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your watch friends, and subscribe if you already haven't. Be sure to click the bell so as to be alerted to new content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.